Good evening and welcome to the Tyngsborough Finance Committee meeting. Today is Wednesday, October 8th, 2025. And because we have a few extra people here, I guess we'll very quickly do introductions. My name is Larry Clausen. I am your chair, and to my left,
Earl Mason.
Ralph Catalano.
Dave Anders, Finance Director. Bill Carrigan.
Colin Loisel, Town Manager.
awesome. And getting right to the agenda, we're going to take one item out of order. We're going to do appoint representative to the Fire Station Building Committee, which is number 5. We're going to move that to number 1. As we have Colin at this very moment, we want to take advantage of the fact that he is here. So Colin, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the Select Board's meeting on Monday, they established a Fire Station Building Committee. By way of background, as you all probably remember, town meeting in May approved borrowing of up to $300,000 to conduct a schematic design for a new fire station. I won't go through the entire history, but I will note that just today we launched the Fire Station Building Committee's page on our website, which has a much more thorough background than I'll give you today, though I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. You can also find on that page all of the historical documents related to this. For those of you that have been involved for some time, we've been tossing around the idea of building a new fire station in one form or another since probably at least 2015. I think that since 2018, our efforts became more intense. And certainly since I returned in September of 2023, we've kind of been nonstop working on that. Originally, we had looked at, back in 2018, a public safety building, a combined building. Since then, we've constructed and opened a brand new middle school to the tune of approximately $54 million, which is the town's share. And so residents have, in fiscal 26, seen the first year of that full tax impact. And so in reviewing our borrowing capacity and what we think residents can afford, because any building that we construct can't be constructed out of the town's operating budget, so it would have to be a debt exclusion vote, similar to how the middle school was. We decided that we really needed to address the most critical issue, which is our fire department. The fire department is a very small building on Kendall Road. We have 3 buildings in town. Only one of them is staffed 24/7. That's the Kendall Road headquarters. It was built many years ago when the town was operating simply a call fire department. And so that's when it was simply meant to store apparatus, and call firefighters would respond from their home or from their work, pick up the apparatus and go to a call. In 2017, the town started providing its own ambulance service, and through that, we were able to start staffing the fire department full-time. Since then, we've basically turned what was just a garage into office space, storage space, and living quarters at virtually no expense to the taxpayer. So the original building was built by donations. The garage bay where we added the ambulance was constructed with funds that were raised by the Firefighters Association. And in 2020, we modified part of the building to be closer to more appropriate for living quarters using federal CARES dollars, which were given to the town in response to ARPA. So they were certainly tax dollars. They came from your federal taxes, but they weren't the local budget. Right now, on top of serious space constraints in the building, our biggest challenge is that there's no way to separate the building so that when a firefighter returns from a call, having been exposed to dangerous contamination, they have to go through their living quarters, the eating quarters, the office space to decontaminate. So there's truly no what they call hot zone versus cold zone. In a safe and proper fire station, you would follow a progression. You'd have the bays are considered hot. That's where the contamination comes back. And then there are decon areas along the way. Decon areas for people, so showers, as well as washing machines for the equipment. That doesn't exist today. Our fire chief is more than happy to give tours to anybody who would like it, and we'll be putting a virtual tour on the website soon. Given all of that, the Select Board last year prioritized focusing on a fire station. Using remaining ARPA funds, which is the American Rescue Plan Act money, we hired an architect to do a needs assessment both for the police and fire departments, as well as to really explore whether or not we could construct, for instance, an addition on either of those locations to advance our needs as opposed to a completely new building. In both cases, the sites are simply too small to consider a renovation. There was a very wild card opportunity to potentially expand storage space at the existing fire department, but it would require us to completely decommission that building during construction, which then leaves you with, well, where do you put them in the meantime? It also would have been incredibly poor financial taste because it wouldn't be our 30 or 50-year solution. It might get us another 10 or 15 years. And so if we're going to spend that kind of money, I think the feeling was, and I certainly agree, that we should just look at building a new building. So with that in mind, in November of 2024, the select board tasked me with working with our fire chief and that architect that we contracted with to identify the best parcel of land. The parameters that we were looking at were a parcel of land that's owned by the town to avoid acquisition costs. It had to be located generally within the town center, and that's simply because it is the only station that is staffed. So anytime a medical call or a fire call comes through, the fire truck and the ambulance are responding from that building. Police are slightly different. They can be stationed anywhere because the cars are out in the neighborhoods patrolling, so they're not responding from a central location. Given Tyngsborough's unique separation with the bridge, part of the town is on that side of the bridge, parts on this side, the chief and our architects felt very strongly that it had to be in the town center. We knew, based on our 30 and 50-year needs, that the building needed to be, I think it's roughly 20,000 square feet, which translated into needing 1.6 acres of buildable land. Now, the reason I say buildable land is because there are some town-owned parcels kind of in or very close to our radius that have more than 1.6 total acres, but many of it is wetlands. And so there's very few ways to get around the wetland protection law in Massachusetts and certainly around our own local bylaws. So that really left us looking at the 250 Middlesex Road parcel, which is what houses the Winslow School. We used the architects that we were in contract with to conduct tests on the site, basically ensuring that with the topography, its location, traffic-wise, that we'd be able to safely construct a station there that fits our needs. And not only did we confirm that we could do it on the site, because the future of the Winslow School has been in flux for 20 years, we also confirmed that if that building stayed on the parcel, a fire station meeting our needs could fit on the back of the Winslow School parcel. If you've ever been up there, there's a substantial drop down and then there's kind of a big grass field. Our property line goes a little bit beyond the tree line. And so we confirmed that no matter what, a station could fit there. Now, I've been transparent about this leading up to the town meeting vote, and I'll continue to say it. There is no denying that the ideal location on the site assumes that the Winslow School is completely demolished. If we were to build it in the back, we would have to forego quite a bit of parking, which is manageable. It wouldn't be manageable if somehow we were able to afford 10 or 15 years from now a new use for the Winslow School, because now you'd have two competing uses, both with their own parking requirements. I think the biggest drawback is that we would forego some of the more modern safety components, like having drive-through bays. There's data that shows that if a fire truck can drive through the bay as opposed to backing up, there's less accidents, there's less risk of accident. If we put this on the back of the parcel, we would certainly have to forego that. It is not a deal breaker by any means, but I think in a perfect world, if you're going to spend $17 or $18 million on a fire station, I think we all feel like we should do it the right way the first time. So with that in mind, the select board had a joint meeting with the Historical Commission on Monday where they discussed kind of largely the Winslow School, but they were primarily focused on if we had any desire to incorporate elements of the physical Winslow School in a new fire station. You may remember that in May of '23, town meeting approved a CPC article that authorized $1.5 million to demo the additions to the Winslow School and then restore just the original schoolhouse, which is about 2 classrooms. It's the front part of the building. That vote also called for the building to be moved closer to Middlesex Road and tilted to face the bridge. When we went to design the project and developed cost estimates, we were close to $700,000 shy of what the actual cost would have been. So since really September of 2024, that project has been on hold. The only way that project could have advanced is if CPC granted more money to achieve that particular purpose and town meeting approved it. Because there was previously a vote, and I'm not going to relive the history of the Winslow School, but for 20 years, everybody's had a different idea of what to do with the school. The closest we got to a resolution on the Winslow School was that vote, which I know there are critics of, but it's the only thing on record I have to go on, that said that at least a portion of the town wanted to see the original schoolhouse saved. With that in mind, when we went out to solicit qualifications for a designer, we left in the contract an option for us to ask the designer to incorporate just that original schoolhouse in the design of a new fire station. And practically how that would work is you'd use that for most likely your administrative spaces, and then we'd build off of the back of it for living quarters, decon, storage, and the garage bays. It would have been an incredibly expensive undertaking because a fire station in Massachusetts has to be the highest category under the building code, which is a category 4 building. I won't pretend to know what that means, except for that it would require substantial upgrades to the old Winslow School in order to make it meet code. At the meeting on Monday, I think, largest item that everybody agreed on was that there was no desire to see a part of the old Winslow School included in a new fire station. And so the select board voted to direct me to enter into a contract assuming a completely new build. So that's where we stand today. The immediate next steps are to fill the Fire Station Building Committee, a charge of which I shared today and is up here. It's also available on the town's website. The membership calls for several staff positions: the town manager, the assistant town manager, the fire chief, the assistant fire chief, as well as our DPW superintendent. In Tyngsborough, facilities falls under DPW. It also calls for a representative from the select board, 2 residents at large, and finally a representative from the finance committee. This is a similar structure to the middle school building committee, which in its creation, we're now in the closing of it, but in its creation included a representative of the finance committee. The charge is relatively simple. Every step of the way, the Fire Station Building Committee will be responsible for guiding the design. It'll be responsible for engaging with the community ahead of any town meeting vote. The select board has made it clear that if possible, they'd like to see this as a town meeting warrant article in May of 2026. So we're approaching that relatively quickly. That's not a finite decision. If we're not there, we're not there. I think we all understand that you really only get one shot at this. So if we're delayed on the design, or if we think that the timing's not right, certainly there's an ability for us to delay, if you will. Once town meeting approves, and assuming they approve the funding for the final design, which will get you to the design docs, the construction docs, the bid docs, and the construction, the committee will also oversee all of the final design elements, and then will be responsible for overseeing the owner's project manager, which is required on a project this size, and then ultimately the construction. For a rough estimate, I'd imagine that this committee will likely meet once monthly. The middle school building committee met once monthly. When you're in the process of bidding out the OPM or you're selecting the construction firm, there would be more frequent meetings because ultimately it would be at the recommendation of the Fire Station Building Committee. But generally speaking, you'd be looking at monthly meetings. And again, that assumes that May of 2026, town meeting is asked and approves the final design and the construction. Certainly, if that doesn't happen, the committee would essentially go on hiatus. So with that said, I'm happy to answer any questions overall about the fire station. I guess the last thing I'll note is that the final step, and I expect this to take place, or at least the conversation to begin at the select board's meeting on the 20th, is to decide where on that parcel the new station will go. The reason that's important is because to get the most accurate cost, the designer is going to need to know where the building is, because that will impact what site work is required. I mentioned that the backside of the parcel will require some substantial filling. So they'd have to take that into consideration. They'd also have to take into consideration how far away it would be from utility stubs on Middlesex Road. So that's the time-sensitive piece of it. The designer, we awarded a contract on Tuesday. They'll get to work in the next couple of days, and so we have time before we need to tell them for certain. And the last thing I'll say is that if on the 20th or at the select board's meeting on November 3rd, they decide that the best place for it is where the Winslow School is, thus it's their intention to demolish the Winslow School, it doesn't mean that the very next day we would start demolishing the Winslow School. We don't have the money to do it, so it would require a town meeting vote from an appropriations standpoint. And in all likelihood, similar to how the middle school was demolished as a part of the middle school project, any vote on the overall fire station project would include the funding necessary to demo the Winslow School, which just essentially means that even if on the 20th or on the 3rd, the select board says the best place for this is on the site of the current Winslow School, which would require demoing it, the building would not come down until the project is approved and we're moving forward. With that, I'm happy to answer general questions about the fire station project or about the Fire Station Building Committee. But what I'd be looking for tonight from the Finance Committee ultimately is for you to appoint someone to the committee. It would be, you'd be on the committee until either you're no longer on the Finance Committee or the building is built and the committee is disbanded.
Oh, what's the designer's deliverable, and when does he deliver whatever they're delivering?
So our contract requires that the schematic design is complete by February 1st.
Schematic design, okay.
The schematic design will get us to the point where we have enough information and enough of a design to give town meeting a much more accurate construction cost estimate based on very high level, cost per square feet and our needs assessment. We have a very rough estimate that it'd be somewhere in the $17 to $19 million
Does the
range.
designer give you that cost estimate, or who gives the cost
The
estimate?
designer will give us the
He'll
cost
give
estimate.
that.
I mean, they use.
Order of magnitude estimate,
Correct.
probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that will include both the cost, or all three, the cost for the final design, the owner's project manager, and the construction. We would lump all of that into the final vote. So it wouldn't be, we could do it separately if we felt like the town wasn't yet ready to fund the full construction. Certainly, we could break it out. It's not super cost effective to do it that way, but it is certainly an option.
And will that design be in enough detail for you to submit that for RFPs for
Yes.
certain vendors? It's gonna be enough detail?
It will only be enough detail for us to onboard the final designer. Certainly, we couldn't use the schematic design
Okay,
to bid out
so
the
you have to go
construction.
another final,
Correct.
got it,
Yeah.
okay.
And in Massachusetts, we can't engage in the final design until we've onboarded an owner's project manager.
Got it.
Colin, have you thought about the 3 sites that you have right now and what we would do with those?
Yes, so there are no plan changes to Station 2, which is on the east side of the bridge on Lakeview Ave, or Station 3, which is on Chestnut Road. Those are truly a call fire station. They just house apparatus, and in the event of a large-scale fire or some sort of callback, call firefighters or off-duty firefighters that come back, respond to those stations, and take the apparatus. As far as the central station on Kendall Road, the town would, in almost all certainty, probably take down that building and expand municipal parking in the town center. That's one of the complaints that we get the most. It's an incredibly challenging site. We could look at and we could issue an RFP to see if there's any private interest in terms of buying the building or the land. It's really small. It's in a challenging zone. It's a B2 in the town center, so the allowed uses are relatively narrow. Eventually, we will need to invest in Station 2 and Station 3, but certainly our priority right now is building a new central station.
Is there any chance or requirement that there be a separate consideration for demolishing the Winslow School?
There is. So it could be structured as a simple town meeting vote for free cash money to demo it. The problem you run into is if that article fails, but the project moves forward, you now don't have a location that you've designed for, essentially.
I just didn't know, because I don't know the whole history of it. Are there people that want to preserve the Winslow School that could bring that as an issue separate from the building of the fire department?
That's a good question. This is the tricky part about this. Technically, the select board, as the chief executives of the town, has ultimate authority over every public building, with the exception of those under the jurisdiction of the school committee. And so hypothetically, a citizen's petition could appropriate funding from a specific source, but town meeting sets the maximum that the select board can spend. It doesn't require that the select board spend that money. Now, I'm certainly not advising the select board, nor would I ever, to disregard a town meeting vote, but it wouldn't be the legal end to that debate because town meeting can't, there's no citizens petition method that would bind the select board to take certain action about a building. Obviously, any elected official that would ignore a town meeting vote might suffer down the road, but it's not legally binding.
All right, thank you.
All right, so with that, anyone of interest in taking on this challenge?
I'll I'll sign up. You guys all signed up the first pass around, so he's right that I'm here. And it seems like the project's going to go through a lot of iterations and a lot of pain, given with the Winslow School situation. So happy to help out and try to move things along.
All right, Philip, thank you very much for stepping forward. And with that, is there anyone else interested in stepping forward? And if not,
You need more than,
no,
no, you just
no,
need one.
no, please,
I
I'm just.
thought about it, but
No, I got the answer I was expecting to get. I just wanted to, I just didn't want to discriminate against anyone else.
I read the notes
thinking,
from last
boy,
time. Everybody else signed up, so.
That'd be very interesting doing this. So, with that, can I get a motion to nominate Phil for the representative of finance for the Fire Station Building Committee?
I'll make a motion to nominate Phil to be the representative.
a second.
Second, I have motion second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Phil, congratulations and thank you very much.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Phil.
Excellent. We'll be in touch about setting up the first meeting, and we'll get a appointment letter that I'll need your signature on, so I'll coordinate chasing you down for that.
$100,000 for a
Excellent.
drawing.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the update,
All right,
Colin.
thank you, Colin. Okay, so moving on to what's on our agenda as item number 2, which is to approve meeting minutes for July 7th, 2025. I was looking at those quick, and they were looking pretty good to me. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second,
I'll second.
any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving those minutes, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? We are good to approve those minutes. Fantastic. And for items 3 and 4, I will turn everything over to David.
Great, thank you. So I'll first start with the FY '27 budget schedule. This includes both the capital and the operating budget. If you have any questions, feel free to interject. So in early September, Colin and I presented the 5-year forecast that we'll be going over tonight to the select board. End of September was the Capital Asset Committee. They had their initial discussion. We sent out the instructions for our department heads for the individual budgets for the year. Next week, I will sit down with the Capital Asset Committee and we'll be discussing funding options. In the beginning of November will be the deadline for said capital projects. Colin and I will be meeting. We'll be sending out those instructions for department heads, sorry. Beginning December will be the deadline for those individual departments to submit. And Colin and I will be meeting for the line item review. And then first thing in January, that is the first budget presentation that we're going to do with the select board. So that'll be the first pass. The next week, we will figure out a date. Whether not set, the 14th isn't set in stone, but Colin and I will come in here and discuss that budget with you guys and solicit your input. The end of the month, we'll do the second pass, and then the select board will be opening the town meeting warrant. We'll have the annual tri-board meeting at the end of February, and then the capital asset will be finalized at the end of March. A couple days later will be the deadline for citizen petition articles and the draft warrant will be created. And then we'll have the final tri-board meeting on April 6th, where we'll finalize the budget. And then we'll have the town meeting on the 5th, the first Tuesday, is it, of May, as per our bylaws. Is there any questions about? I know I kind of flew through that, but you guys will be along for the process, so.
Is this similar to prior years? No significant changes, right?
So what Colin and I have been trying to do is get a draft to the boards as quick as possible, so that there's no real surprises. You know, late in February or early March is really late for to give you the first pass. So as you can see, we're really trying to get that first week of the new year. First pass, end of January will be the second pass. So at that point, the budget will be really coming together. So, trying to just be as transparent as possible. Otherwise, there's no real changes in there. Just trying to push it back a little bit where we can to get those first passes possible.
Good.
Schedule seems right down the middle.
Okay, moving on to the one with a little more numbers, and I'll try to go a little slower on this one. Again, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them as we go, or so what this is this is our preliminary 5-year forecast. We are tasked to do this each year by the select board. What you'll see on here is there's actually 5 years of actual expenses, right? So that's 21 through 25. 26 is budgeted because we're in 26 right now. And then we have 27 through 31. So we can't even fit that many years all up on the screen. But in the first quadrant here, this is going to be our revenues, and these are our actual revenues. Okay. Sorry, I'm down a little bit. I'll remind everybody how the levy limit goes. This is the real estate and property taxes every year, okay? Prop 2.5, which was in the early 80s, says that it can only go up by 2.5% each year. So the calculation is the prior year levy limit times 2.5% plus the new growth, which is, everything in town, right? New businesses, new residents. That new growth, the first time they're taxed, and that is your levy limit, and then added to that is the debt exclusion, right? Right now, generally speaking, debt exclusion is going to be like your fire, police, public safety, or schools, right? The middle school building is going to make up the most of our debt exclusion. The elementary school is actually, we're just wrapping up paying for it just as we start paying for it. Okay. Now, the debt exclusion, the exclusion part means that is not within the 2.5% law. Okay. It's just a dollar for dollar amount that you're able to bill on top of taxes, and it's paid out, so it's billed directly, and then it's paid out the dollar for dollar debt payment. Okay. You know what I'm saying? So this year, for instance, $2.9 million is our payment this year, less the $1 million that the town offered to pay. So 1.9 can be billed to the town on top of the levy limit. I hope that the calculation on the screen kind of shows that you can see here's the levy limit for 2021. This is how you start in 2022 is with that number. Here's your 2.5% plus your new growth.
How does increased assessed values change that?
So the assessed values themselves. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the assessor's office goes through and does all of that evaluation. I'm certainly not part of that, but there's still a maximum amount that those can be increased each year.
Okay.
Dare I speak on behalf of the assessor's department? They did a great presentation in the Civic Academy just about it.
Okay.
So
So 26 kind of, you assume it's the same assessed values, or do those?
yeah, so
That's your assumption?
Again, regardless of the assessed value, though, we can only bill to that formula.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Got it.
So if everybody's house in town, I believe right now it's like around 500,000, somewhere
Okay.
around there. I'll say if everybody's house was just $1 million, the town we didn't get twice as rich.
Okay.
We're stuck to this formula. Unfortunately, well, fortunately or unfortunately, it's great. I mean, I'm from New Hampshire, and we don't have this law in place to limit the amount that the tax can change every year.
Okay.
So we are still stuck to the formula to get to This is the major funding source of our revenues, but it's not our only.
How does it change with like a change of ownership of a house? Are you able to reassess at a higher value at that point?
I mean, again, I'm gonna have to defer to the assessing department. I'm not sure on that side of things. But again, we are stuck to this formula. So it's still the percentage of last year's levy limit is really the maximum we're allowed to bill. Sorry, I don't have much more information in depth there.
On the new growth there, the 500K kind of forecast going out. 2021 obviously was COVID, right? So a lot of things happening then. But since then, you haven't hit 500K. Is that reasonable? Do we have plans or ideas that are going on that support that?
Well, so for instance, the 2025 or 2026, where we have 500,000 in there, that actually was 850. So
Is that the development?
So we get that number at the end of June, but when we develop the budget, right? As you just saw the budget schedule, we finalized the budget in May, right? So we don't know the final new growth number. So this 2026 500,000 matches the warrant. I just didn't want anybody to look at this 2026 budget and not be able to tie it to the warrant. But had we known the exact number, it's actually $850,000. So in 2027, we're expecting we have both the remnants of the Toll Brothers. That was supposed to be about $1.2 million was the expectation. So there's still some money that's going to be coming off that. Then we have the 2 warehouse projects. So there's still stuff down the pipeline. Yes, in the past, they were closer to 4. Like I said, this year was 9. It's in purple because that's kind of our guesses, right? Those are our levers to kind of, if we can be conservative as we can, we'll keep that. So you're right. I mean, 2020, those numbers in 21 and 22, you'll see, I kind of discard them a little bit for the projection because coming out of COVID really changed things. So, and then we have state aid, okay? You'll see I put the percentage of year over year underneath here. State aid stays right around that 7.5 million per year, stays within 1% really. Even the 3-year average, this column right here is the 3-year average of 23, 24, and 25, right? As I just mentioned. I would generally use a 5-year look back, but 21 and 22, I wouldn't say are unreliable, but at the time, there was a lot less like permitting going on, interest rates for one. We were getting less than $100,000 a year in interest, and now last year we had over $500,000. So I wouldn't expect interest rates to change too much in the banks. I mean, it's been going down a little bit, but certainly better than it was in 21, 22.
Can you explain a little bit on the state aid? Because I was looking into that one, and I saw some of the state actually went up year on year, and typically speaking, they're 2-3% plus. I know it's mostly focused around education, but how do we as a town, target some of the other programs the state has going on?
So I'm happy to bring up the cherry sheet for you. Are you familiar with how to get to the cherry sheets and all this?
Yes.
We'll do 26 for the budgeted one. So, I mean, generally speaking, the cherry sheet is a state formula that they are going to, you'll see as part of our, the budget schedule here, the senators come in and discuss with us, and that's the response we get, is that, there's a pool, and that's what these calculations are based off of. This will show, this is our FY26, the estimated charges, but so you're saying you saw it going up? Because
They generally issue more aid, right, as needed, and a lot of times it's tied to specific initiatives by the state. I guess how does the town actively seek out some of those areas that might benefit us, right? Because here we're flat, right? So, and most of it's education side, right?
Certainly.
And we projected 0% out in the future, right? So, but Massachusetts is doing a lot, and they give out a lot of aid too for a lot of those items. And it could be through public safety, infrastructure. So I guess like how do we educate the town to seek after some of the state aid to, to alleviate some of the taxpayers?
I mean, so this is part of the presentation that the school does. As part of our budget process, we'll go through how they are speaking to the state, right? Because as you said, it's mostly education-based. It seems like the more that they give, the more that they claw back in the assessments. If you see that, that's a contra revenue, the state assessment part. So as the revenue goes up, so does that assessment, which is why it kind of flatlines. I can't say specifically which line items for the cherry sheet, how we're getting that. I know that they are fighting for that money, and again, we have the discussion with the superintendent and the senators come in and discuss the formula, but that's really what they give us, is that it's formula-based, based on, these properties of the town. All right, actual or local receipts. Local receipts are kind of the rest of our it has our motor vehicle taxes. This is where your cannabis taxes go. This is where building permits are. Now, I put on here the budgeted versus actual because one of the larger things that Colin and I try to portray is that we are conservative as possible on the revenue and expense side. And hopefully, both of those show that we outperform our revenue projections and then, are better on the expense side. And that's how we end up with a slight surplus each year. That's our general strategy. So if you see each year of our budgeted expenses versus our actual, we've been close to almost 10% every year. Over. Okay, so that's it's about a $5 million total receipts received, so that's about $500,000 in revenue more that we aren't counting on, that we remain conservative and that assists us in our budget, any shortfalls that we might have. Again, so if you look at our 3-year average, that's almost 10% each year. So on top of us under budgeting, conservatively budgeting each year by 10%, it's going up 10% every year. Now, would I count on 10% every year? Absolutely not, because again, the interest rates increasing has been great. The building permits has been huge with Toll Brothers, but the cash cow is going to slow down, right? So we do factor these in when looking forward. We do have, other projects that are going to supplement the permit permit account, and we expect earnings on investment to remain level. But it's not going to forever be 10% every year, but it has been looking over about the last 4 years. Okay, and then other available funds. So these are the final revenue that we can use for the general fund. So just rehashing here, you have the levy limit plus the debt exclusion. You have state aid, actual receipts, and then other available funds, which is anything that we are appropriating, say, out of our stabilization funds. For instance, this year we used our debt stabilization. We used some of that money to assist with the new school coming on board. It wasn't necessarily, we didn't need it to subsidize the budget, we just did it in case. It was kind of a cushion. This also has indirect and fringe benefits from both our enterprises, the ambulance and the sewer. And then any other type of revolving fund that pays into the general fund if there's some type of use of services. So there really isn't too much on the revenue side that can change too much. You know, if we're looking at that, you know, the entire revenue budget for 21, let's go more modern here. 2025 was about, you know, 50 million, but if we're looking at the levy limit, 34 million of that was real estate personal property. So that's where the majority comes from. I did present the, as part of the Civic Academy here about a month ago, how it comes up, because the question was, do you just bill that 2.5% every year for your taxes, right? Every single year, do you just maximize the amount that you need? And my response to that is, we don't. The actual budget itself isn't the revenue side of things. You don't project how much money you have to spend and then spend it. You do it the other way. You say how much you have to spend and then figure out where that funds are going to come from. So with that in mind, what you do is you take the expense part of things and then you subtract, you kind of go backwards here. You take out the available funds, your projected local receipts, the state aid, and that remainder amount is the amount that is going to be the real estate property taxes that are going to be needed, okay? And there's a whole, that I'm in the process currently of doing the tax rate recap is what it's called with the Division of Local Services. And that's how you determine your tax rate, is because that number, the X of the remainder that you need for the budget, is then divided by the entire property value. That's where you get the 14.1% or so. It's a little more in depth than we are going through today, but. Okay, going down. These are our expenses. These are how they're broken out. So the general government's gonna be more of your catch-all, okay? Public safety is pretty straightforward. That's your fire department, police department. Education's the school and our local assessment. Public works is our highway. Health and Human Services is going to be our health department. We have culture and rec is our recreation department. Debt service, risk management, and employee benefits are going to be all your liabilities and insurances, retirements, health insurance, okay? And then other amounts raised. The reason this is a number before and then goes down into zero is because it's, the other amount raised is actually an assessment, school part of the state aid, and it's included in this, but instead of putting it down the expenses, I do in that state aid. So, in case you're wondering how we just started to save that money. Now this does look that we had these huge surpluses year over year, and then in 2024 was a deficit with us just squeaking by in 25. There's a bit of a free cash kind of effect in here that when we appropriate free cash in 1 year, but don't spend it until the next year, it kind of looks like a revenue 1 year and expense in the next year, so it kind of throws things off. If we're being honest, I'd say since I've been here, 5 years next month, we remain right around in the $250,000, $500,000 surplus each year, based because of the local receipts, mainly that 500,000 revenue, and our expenses. We haven't gone over our expenses since I've been here. Beyond just that, again, the flux of using free cash in the next year it creates a budgeted amount in 1 year that the next year, when it comes out, it made 2024 look bad, but I assure you there was not a surplus, or a deficit rather. And then you'll see that we budgeted a $50,000 surplus for the next year. We don't generally budget a surplus, it was just a little bit of wiggle room for when we're doing the presentations in January and February, and we have, say, a department that is looking to bring in someone, you know, another employee or something, we want something. If we had a balanced budget at that point, then everything would just be a no. And we just say, oh, we're done here, right? So. All
Dave,
right.
what have you used for an initial assumption, just out of curiosity, for healthcare increases for 27? I mean, that was a big one, right, for the past year or so. But are you just pick an assumption right now? I know it's too early, but.
No, we're expecting 18% next year for health insurance, and we
18?
just had 18 last year.
So is that the 7% that it drives in total for benefits?
So the thing is with one of the reasons that we come in under on expenses is because we were way over budgeting health insurance, because maybe we're ahead of the curve, maybe we just, so at the end of the year, remember we did the year-end transfers, right? We took everything out of health insurance, right? Because we had a remainder left in that account. So we have been budgeting off of our budgeted number. So when they've been telling us it's gonna go up 18% next year, we changed the budgeted number up 18% instead of the actual. So we still had a significant cushion. So it hasn't really, I mean, it hurts, don't get us wrong. Everybody's feeling that pain. But overall, the 7% here is included, you know, with that 12% that was the big jump from 25 to 26. That's part of and the thing is with this preliminary scale, so these percentages in between are the changes year over year, sandwiched between the year. Now, I did the same thing on the projection side, skipping ahead a little bit, so that we can change these and we'll change the number live. So if you, instead of 10%, we can do 11 here, and it will change everything moving forward. Okay, so it's a bit of a live document, but it's just it's a projection model. So currently, it takes generally the 3-year average of the last 3 years and projects up based off that, generally speaking. Okay. So kind of burying the lead a little bit. But, so the levy limit's a calculation, it's all the 2.5%. Now, the 500,000, as Philip had mentioned, that's our new growth estimate. It can certainly, there was an additional 450,000 last year. I do not expect $1 million this year, but I also don't expect it to be too much below 500,000. If I had to guess on an average for the next 5 years, that's what our 500,000 is. And again, it's all a live document, so everything will filter through if we do feel to adjust it. There's nothing in cement here. Green, that is the debt exclusion that we discussed. As I said, our first payment this year is going to be $2.9 million for the middle school. But as the town had offered the $1 million towards that, right? So that it wasn't all on the taxpayers. And that, I know that sounds silly to say, because it's not like I'm paying $1 million. It's still the town paying $1 million, but it's incorporated within the budget, within the expenses, instead of being added on top, which is what we were saying the debt exclusion was. Okay, you see the nuance there. So this is 1.9 on top of the regular billings that we can do, because $1 million of that is going to come from, well, 900 is going to come from the town and 100,000 from the Lakeview properties from the school. Okay, so that's what that 1.9 million is. Okay, so if there were issues going forward with, say our next collective bargaining agreement, that's really one of the larger things. And it's not just teachers, I'm not targeting the schools here, but all unions, when we're doing the collective bargaining agreements, that first year is kind of like a catch-up usually, and that's really where a lot of towns are getting in trouble around us, is when that collective bargaining agreement hits. That's when you get the large expense difference year over year. Now, ours is going to expire at the end of next year, and if something was to happen, we do have the possibility of the debt exclusion, right? we're allowed to put the 2.9 on top of the levy limit instead of doing something like an override. You know, and we try not to say the O word, but I'm just saying. So it's a lever, okay? It does exist there, that the town is currently paying it, but if instead of a separate tax that would then stay forever, we can smooth out a jump in expenses. Any comments on that? Okay. Going down, I used, pretty level funded for the available funds. Again, that's our, those are based off of insurance and usage of buildings for our enterprise. So they would probably go up, but again, we try to stay relatively conservative in our estimates. You can see that revenue over the last 3 years has gone up about 4.5%. Then going down, I know that we had briefly talked about how did I project going forward. You can see in the middle we have the 3-year averages. Those are all, within the 3-year averages, and then there will be, so say for general government, I put 7% here, but then back down to 5% after that collective bargaining agreement kicks in. You know what I'm saying? It'll be the second year of it. So there's tools within this to kind of show a little more of a flow than to be robotic and saying it's going to be exactly the 7% that it was the last 3 years. Okay, and things have changed. Like for instance, the highway, it kind of looks like it went down 10% in here, but it's because what we did was instead of funding through the general fund for the streets, we have the cannabis money that's paying for it, as well as the millionaire's tax is also supplementing that as well. So it was different allocation of funds, but I would certainly not project that highway is going to go down to 10% every year. That would be wonderful. So that's why I made this red, because I just didn't want to, I had to override that. The green that is our debt service, and then the 900,000, that is the excluded debt that the town is paying. So again, if you take this out, this would, or let's say we cut it in half. My formula definitely did not update that time. Right? Technical difficulties. Can't tell you why that did not. Oh, there, it just did right there, right? Anyways, no one wants to see me play with an Excel sheet. But, so if we were to lessen the amount that we're contributing to the debt, then our expenses go down. And then, so for instance, a projected $80,000 deficit in 2031 could be absorbed, let's say. Now, I would absolutely, the farther out we get, the more difficult it is to project, right? The next couple of years, we're pretty confident in 2031. I would not say that those numbers are anywhere concrete. But so this is our preliminary forecast, and we'll be kind of diving in individual, as we're developing the 2027 budget, and as the 26 comes in, we'll be working with newer actuals. We'll have more years to work on that 3 to 4 year average, right? And then collective bargaining agreements are certainly going to change the future as well.
I think it's a great start. Here we are, October, great preliminary info at this point in the year, so good job.
Philip, you look like you're ready to dive in. Go here.
I just look at some of the pacing on the expense side, and 2.5% with 500K projection on growth is not really enough to offset it. So I wouldn't want the tax rate, the 14 and some change to go up on everybody, right?
So, I mean, so you can see the expenses are outpacing the revenues, right? Which is not going to last. Like that's not going to be suitable. So, what do we do, right? I can tell you that the town of Tyngsborough's rapport between the school and the administration is unlike any that I've been in any different town. And what's really, really helped us, right, to avoid the troubles that everybody around us is having is the school has stuck to it. They made a 5-year agreement to stay at a 2.7% increase for the last 5 years, okay? And so that has kept costs down significantly, right? The school, along with the assessment, so I just don't want to include them, but they're almost 27 million. That's almost 50% of the budget, right? So every time they change by a percentage point, it's a huge issue. But them willing to work with us is been enormous. We are going to sit down and have discussion going forward. I don't think it's going to stay at 2.7 now, but you know, it allows us to project, right? So I know in other towns that I've worked in, we're talking like 6% and 65% of the budget. And, you know, those things really come in like a tidal wave and change you know, how everything looks. So yes, it's tough to just use a really rough estimate of how the last three years went is going to be how tomorrow or the next 3 years go. This is a very high level.
You know, the education example you shared there, that's a good one, right? You show like, you know, it's a mutual agreement. 2.8% is roughly our proposition 2.5, right? It's the offset. I guess it would be helpful to shine light on some of the other departments and cost initiatives they're taking as well to keep this in line. And I know it's the surplus and the amounts have been pretty relatively stable, but we talk about larger scale projects, right? You did the middle school and potentially a fire department coming down, right? As we go to invest in those areas, we don't want to go back to the taxpayers every single time. So again, you build it up from the bottoms up. There's a lot of assumptions in there. I would just scrutinize and say, hey, what are some of the other options we have on the table to kind of balance that out?
Certainly. I mean, the question I'm going to have next week with the capital asset committee is where's the money going to come from, right? So there's really, I guess there's a couple options, right? You have free cash. Free cash, we generally put aside, you know, $300,000 to $400,000 a year. Those are smaller projects, let's be honest here, right? We know fire, we're talking about fire stations can be, don't quote us, $18 million, right? That's 300,000 isn't going to hit that. The one good thing, well, we've been so conservative through the last few years, okay? And I'm not saying just in like a local receipt thing, but even borrowing. If you can think back, through COVID, we used the CARES money and ARPA money for capital projects. That was our town policy of what we were going to do. We weren't going to borrow because we knew we had the school coming and we knew that there was a big bill coming. So the generally what you're trying to do as a town is keep an acceptable debt service limit, right? You want it to have, you know, between like 2 and 5% of your expense budget being your debt service. But our debt service is actually starting to fall off because we didn't borrow for that. So that is opening up room for us as well within the budget. Same with the excluded debt. Like I said, the elementary school is being paid off. This is the last year that we're making our final payment right as the middle school comes up. I mean, we didn't plan this out. We don't want to take any credit for that. But what that does is, instead of the entire amount being brand new, you know, you are already paying, let's say, $300,000. So now a new expense isn't going to feel the same. Within the departments, what we do is we generally level fund every line item. The only thing that we expect to go up is the contractual salary amounts. And then we have a meeting with every single department and say, all right, if you need an increase, we need to know why. And what's the reason for it? You know, so our departments, by and large, like I said, are level funded year after year. We don't try to lean out our budget, so there's lean out meaning if you have $1,000 office supply budget and you only spend $100 every year, let's take that $900, right? Because then you leave no room for, potential expenses that you might need. So our budgets have some leeway to them, but there's not a whole lot of increases across besides salary. So if I was to break this out, I mean, I have this as a whole spreadsheet broken out, salary, expenses, capital items per department, right? It looks a little different on my end. But, so salaries are really the drivers everywhere. That's every businesses, not that we're a business, but greatest expense.
You mentioned some of that one-time money that was available a few years ago. Other towns use this operating funds, right? Isn't that one of the ways they got into trouble, some of that money?
So, I mean, I can't speak to that, but I can tell you that our select board
Did not.
would not
Right,
let us
but
even
I
dream
think
about
that's
it.
how some of the other towns got in trouble.
As well as when we had our, the cannabis impact, if you remember, initially the town had made an agreement with both dispensaries that not only would we get how it works is the state taxes 20%, I believe, and we get 3% of that. We had a 3% on top of that the town was receiving. That was our host allocation agreement, and so we were not double dipping, we were, it was for the impact to the town, right? But even then, we knew that was being challenged in court, so our select board would not even allow us to budget that in our local receipts going forward. We had to pretend like that was not going to be there every year. And they were right? That was a great, I believe we got $1.4 million over 3 years, and then it was gone. $0. So I think, the administration has had great foresight in not kind of, ARPA was really good to us, and so was CARES, and we remained within our normal strategy, and you just look around us, and you can see that we're still hanging on here, so. Anything else?
Good first pass.
And that's what it is. I don't want it to be anything more than that, but this is a high-level first pass. Obviously, we are making decisions based off more of in-depth, looking at salaries year over year, expectations, individual departments, how they're breaking down. These are supposed to make more sense tied to like the warrant. That's exactly, if you look at 2026, those are the numbers you saw on the warrant. So that's what I was trying to present to you today.
Dave, this is really well done, and we appreciate it. And we appreciate the explanation that went along with everything, and really helpful in helping us understand and consider stuff going forward. So this is great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, I think we have covered everything on the agenda, except for closing ourselves out.
A motion to adjourn.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Again.
All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Good job, David.
Thank you.